Welcome to the latest episode on the Robust Ramblings podcast. Today, I, Gideon Maas, am going to be your host, and I'm joined by property expert and co-owner of Potchefstroom sales side, Rudolph Kriek. Rudolph shares a bit on his journey from studying engineering, going into full-time church-paid ministry, and then also transitioning into the business world, sharing some insights on his family life, how he balances all of these things, and being present in every aspect of his life that he finds himself. So I hope you guys enjoy this. Sweet. Okay, cool. Rudolph, thanks for joining us today. It's a wonderful privilege to have you on the Robust Ramblings podcast. Rudolph is a good friend of mine. We've been friends also for, I think, close to 9 years. Rudolph was a big part of the process of me getting saved and coming into community. He was our youth pastor or our student pastor at some stage. Big part of our entrepreneurship community here in Potch. And also part of the sales team of Potch Eiendomme or Properties, one of the local property agents or agencies. And I want to thank you, Rudolph, for making the time to be here with me today. Also, Rudolph has a wife and 4 kids. He's got as many kids as I've been married in years.
Love it.
Well done. Rudolph, thanks for joining me.
It's a pleasure to be here and to have a chat. And it's a privilege. I think mentioning the 9 years, I'm reminded about that one vacation that we had climbing in Potchefstroom, was it?
It was in Waterval Boven.
So no, we had some lekker times. Most of our relationship was built in the ministry years and spending community time. I remember back when I was not a student, but so involved with student stuff that I still felt that nice life of just being free and really pursuing Jesus in it all. I think that made the biggest difference. And then obviously seeing you going from being a student and then going into business and your own entrepreneurial activities, it's been a pleasure. So I'm joyful being here.
Yeah, great. So Rudolph, I think we can maybe start by just you sharing a bit of your story and your background. And I'm always fascinated in how different entrepreneurs start their journeys. Some have access to parents who are entrepreneurial, some don't. Some got at it lucky. Some worked really hard. We all have failures of some sort. And I mean, you've gone through everything from selling beard oil, coffee, properties. So I would love to hear your story. So would you please just share some of it with us today, and then we'll see where it leads.
So I grew up in Pretoria, and I came to Potch coming as a student studying mechanical engineering. Finished that up in 2015. So I think I grew up in a family where my dad was in corporate, and he pivoted from corporate to his own business, and then eventually my mom pivoted from working for a business to her own business. So there were always business and entrepreneurial ventures and stuff that we had conversations on, and investments. And so that was a normal way for me, especially in property as well. My father bought a property at the coast out of a late estate of someone. And so that always fascinated me quite a lot. And I came to NWU studying mechanical engineering, finished that up in 2015. I came to faith at the end of my matric year. So I spent a lot of my time as a student balancing this new life in Jesus and community and reading the word and praying and really spending time with learning to listen to what God says and kind of just bashing out your calling with him and all these new terms that was new to me back then. At the same time being a student and really focusing on life that just makes more sense than just going from one space to another and just finishing up all the chapters until you eventually go on pension and then just end your life. And so I was stirred in my heart to really make sense of these things that I'm feeling while I'm studying. Also want to be faithful with that. And then in my final year in 2014, I really felt called for full-time ministry, which was something out of the ordinary for me. I mean, my focus being an 18, 19-year-old was I'm going to finish up engineering. I'm going to become a great engineer. I'm going to drive a Mercedes. I'm going to stay in Brooklyn in the Jacaranda leafy suburbs. And I'm just going to be a good businessman. And there I was, 2014, felt called just after I signed a bursary with a company, an international company. And so there I was, I've got this bursary responsibilities obviously you've got family realities, thinking of, your dad has a certain idea of what you are becoming, especially if you're in your fourth and final year of engineering. And I feel like staying in Potch, and I feel like doing ministry, and I feel like called to do it in such a way that I'll quite be willing to stake everything I have and everything I do on that. And started having conversations. And the thing in ministry is you don't just pitch up at a church, knock on its front door and say, here I am, I want to be a full-time pastor.
Because there's no trust if that's the case.
100%. And I didn't study into theology. I spent a lot of time in the local ministry called Kruispunt, which is cross period if you translate it. Meaning that the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ on the cross and what he did for us there, the gospel story, that is what we need to preach to get students saved. That was kind of the focus and the idea of the ministry. And I spent about, at that stage, 4 years in the ministry, from the music team to leadership. So I was heavily involved in the local church here in Potch. And as soon as I made that decision of really casting my vote toward that call and saying, okay, God, I don't know what this looks like. I'm young. I have many of the choices I'm going to make now. At that stage, I was 22. It's going to affect a lot of the other years to come. And I understand that, but I'm willing. I don't know exactly what to do. And so lately, one of the colleagues working with me here, Donovan Johnson, has got this phrase where he says, follow the favor. And so I like that, and I kind of think that's exactly what I did. Okay, God, I'm willing. Like, where are you leading me? Follow the favor of God where he opens doors and stuff. And I fast forward at the end of that year, I found myself sitting in Rassie Fourie, who is still the leader of Duet Gemeente, who is the church of which Kruispunt is the student ministry. I sat in his office. At that stage, he was the pastor of the church, that I was just a leader in the student ministry of that church. It was a big deal. I'm sitting there, I'm 22 years old. And it's like he invites me to a meeting in his office. And I'm like, yo, Lord, I'm sitting here and this is amazing and I can't believe it. And nothing I did kind of made that happen, if that makes sense. And he says, God has spoken to me about you as well. What is God saying to you? And I'm like, God's saying to me, I must come to do full-time ministry. I don't know what that looks like, but I'm willing. And the long and the short is he invited me to do a year for the church, if that word or terms make sense. So I made a decision to then come back in 2016 to Potch to be of service to the church full-time.
In whatever capacity they need.
Exactly. So the capacity was a little bit structured. It would have been, I would have stayed in all the position and responsibilities I had in the student ministry, but then I would, for 1 quarter, do student ministry kind of in the work hours of the church, trying to see what the work hours inside of the church throughout the week looks like when it comes to student ministry, that I was obviously always just experiencing maybe on a Wednesday evening or a Sunday.
Yeah, like administration, there's planning, coordination, there's a lot of actual behind the scenes stuff that you had to get exposure to.
And there were people in those positions. So I had exposure to the pastor of the students and what he would typically do in a week, see some of the student leaders for coffee, go about praying on campus or starting new ministries. So there was a lot to learn, and pivot from there to teenage ministry, pivot from there to children ministry. And so by November that year, I started becoming the full-time pastor of Kruispunt, if that makes sense, and started leading the Kruispunt ministry, which was such a beautiful time of my life. I was at that stage, I was single, so obviously I had a lot of time. I didn't have necessarily responsibilities of marriage and kids and stuff like that. And I was still young. I was at that stage. I turned 23 that same November. So I started working full-time as the student leader, or the leader of the student ministry, not the student leader, because I wasn't a student anymore. But I still felt, in a sense, as a youngster that really had a big heart for my friends. Some of my friends were still studying. So it was nice in terms of its timing. I remember I had a friend that was full-time in ministry in some other capacities in Potch. And I always kind of told him, I wish I was 30 having some kids where I can really teach these students about marriage and kids and stuff. And he just said, listen, dude, if you're 30 with kids and a marriage, you're not going to be able to be on campus at 10 at night, praying with people, going out to street evangelism. None of these things would be easy every night. And I was like, oh, I kind of get that. And fast forward to literally being 30 now, having a wife and 4 kids. It's true. It's just true. So that was a very healthy, lively, full scheduled season of my life.
Yeah. And I mean, we were at that stage literally in the middle of a revival in our city.
100%.
Seeing so many people get saved. I mean, we saw miracles and, people getting healed and people coming to faith. I mean, biggest miracle of all. And it was so encouraging. So I was saying this to Herman Blackie the other day as well, I can see the fruit of that season of our lives, the things we learned, the relationships we built, because outside of a ministry capacity, we're still living in the fruit of that. The relationships, the connections, the network, the skills we've been learning, even from one another, and thinking of you getting a lot of exposure to the entire, call it organizational aspect of church, which most people never see or understand because they only get there on a Sunday or a small group or whatever. I think a lot of that, if I look at your life, has actually prepared you for the season that you are in now. I mean, before we fast forward to this season, would you mind just touching on some of those key things that you learned and why you think that was important?
Definitely. I think the way the ministry was structured back then, there were a core leadership that stood around the leader of the ministry. And so from the get-go, actually before the get-go, even before I became the leader, there was this feeling of teamwork, the feeling of saying that more than one person's strength would mean victory, or more than one person's strength is needed for success, whether it be a project, whether it be an outreach, whether it be a Sunday service. That was one big thing. And so I grew up in a family having 3 brothers. So I was always more lean towards doing things in community with someone. I would much rather go with someone on a road trip than just drive down somewhere, if that makes sense. And so from an early stage in the, call it the sphere of ministry, but also in the sphere of business, if that makes sense. I mean, in a sense, a church has got structures, it has got budgets and stuff that has to be prepared well and do well for it to function. It's an organism with people in structure that have to function, obviously with the main goal of really reaching people, discipling people, get them saved, get them to live a life where they can hear God's voice and really understand what calling is and. And so that was a big block, if I can call it that, really learning what teamwork can do. And I always say 1 + 1 is like 4 or 5. One person plus one person. It's not just 2 persons. It's a team that has a team dynamic that can glean off creativity and glean off each other's energy. And if you get married in that first season, you drink more tea, you eat more cookies, because now you don't want tea, but your wife's like, I'm going to make tea. Do you want some? Like, no, but yes, because I want to drink tea with you. So kind of that concept of 1 in 1 is much more than just 2 people.
Yeah, I think the right term is synergy, because on the one hand, you are able to do more than each of you would be able to do in your individual capacity.
100%. So that was a big thing for me that I learned. Budget, I remember receiving the budget and be like, I didn't realize there's a lot of pockets of finances that is needed to run the church. And I use that term specifically, and I had to realize how to use those different pockets to really come to the main goal. I remember being able to go and really spend time with students, maybe in some coffee shops, really spending deep time with them where they can ask questions or just build relationship. And realizing the gift of hospitality, really pulling people in your house. I remember there was a stage where we were just 8 people and it grew to maybe 12. And there were ministry evenings where I had over 30 people in my living room.
And you didn't have a big living room either.
We didn't have a big living room. And it was right across Michael's, which is my second oldest son. It was right across his bedroom. And I remember just praying with Carissa, Lord, just make this child a sleeper. And he was a sleeper. He could sleep while 30 people just across from his bedroom spend time in prayer or fellowship or drinking coffee or just being students. Administration, Kruispunt was a big ministry. They were set to the evening side of a Sunday, so they kind of function in a sense like a church as an organism, having its own PM service and its own discipleship structures and leadership structures, outreach structures. We started doing much more and more outreaches, reaching from local to international outreaches. And just being a part of that, shortly after I became more full-time, if that makes sense, being the leader, Duet launched an internship year where they kind of, what I did for that 1 year, they kind of pivot that towards really structuring something that was available for youngsters who would have felt a call to full-time ministry to come and participate in that. And that wasn't my idea. That was something that Rusty and the team and everyone involved really put together well. But I'm mentioning that because all of a sudden there were all these youngsters in the office, whereby previous years I was maybe the only one, or there were one or two guys prior to me that I know spent a lot of time in the office hours at Duet. And so just seeing that vibrancy, energy, what that can create, what a new project that is really positioned well to really solve a need, what that can mean for a business or a church or a ministry. Those are the things I learned. And I remember always kind of feeling a little bit of a nudge toward business. There were really seasons where I did feel the Lord say that focusing on business in this season would mean me not being fully obedient and present to the call of being full-time in full-time ministry. Because there's a peculiarity in full-time ministry that is needed. You need to push yourself in there. It's like when a child learns to swim. There's a time where he needs to be at a space where he can swim, but he's very near to a space where he can stand and be still head above water. And there's a time where he needs to swim to the deeper end, really pushing himself beyond that limit of, okay, I can turn around and stand. No, you can't turn around. You need to push through to the other side where you can grab a hold, and then obviously doing that too early would just be foolish. But it was kind of that idea that the Lord kind of just reminded me on, like, be in full-time ministry. And I didn't know that I was going to be called for business, pivoting from ministry to business. And that's important, because if I felt that the call of business is just right around the corner, there were a lot of sacrifices and things that I wouldn't have learned. So that's a big thing for me. But what I want to touch on is there were seasons where I felt a little bit of time and energy that I could push into stuff. And so all the hobbies and stuff that I started, I remember falling in love with oils and just the benefit of like almond oil and what it does to your skin, and just starting mixing my own beard oil, and just the last time I properly shaved was back when I graduated. So it just mixing my own oils and figuring out all the benefits of that, and eventually started selling some of it and started branding some of it. And
so what led to you thinking I can sell this stuff? Because I mean, obviously making it for yourself is one thing, but then having to buy larger quantities, take out more money, take a risk. Like, what led to that decision?
That's a good question. I think for me, honestly, just the literal story is I was on vacation, walking into this place where we always had pancakes called Mac Banana, and it's a place where there's all these little shops. And I walk into the shop and I'm looking at macadamia nut oil, which is a very expensive oil, but in KwaZulu-Natal they farm with macadamia nuts, and so all of a sudden the oil is not that expensive, and I'm like, is this normal? And so I take up the bottle and I'm like, Madison Farms, like these people are just on a corner, and I literally call up the farmer. Hey, I'm just a guy on vacation, having no idea that down the line will be part of a beard oil company that I would just kind of do on the side. Go see him in his living room, speaking about, like, what do you do? You know, they cold press the macadamia nuts on site, and it's this, and kind of being impressed with what they do, and buying almost 1,000 rand worth of oils. Now,
that guy's a good salesman.
He was a good salesman. That was back in 2017. I was in ministry. Like 1,000 rand was a lot for me. And I was on vacation. So I was like on a budget and spending 1,000 rand on oils. And then I had a box full of 1 liter oils that I had to carry back in the Polo. But I had kids at that stage. So there was a pram and there was this and that. And so just, I think kind of, and then obviously now you sit with, let's say, 20 liters worth of macadamia oil, which is a lot of macadamia oil, and just thinking, okay, but maybe what I've learned, maybe I can push it to something. And at that stage, Carissa also realized she had a great love for branding and marketing and communicating, and she's very good at it. And still something to this day that she has done quite well. And just started developing a product, just going through the motions of calling people that I knew that at that stage was in the product line. And I remember kind of a few months later, I get called from a lady she was actually the reason why I kind of fell in love with oils, due to a gift that they had given to me and my wife. And I'm like, this really benefits, like there's true benefits in this. It's just not a Ponzi scheme of trying to make money. And I remember she called up, she's got all these empty bottles that she bought because she wanted to do a beard oil line, but then she decided not to. Do I want to just maybe buy it off her? And now all of a sudden you've got like 100 amber bottles that's empty. And so those things kind of stimulates energy, if that makes sense. And I can't really call it a business, because I mean, in the end, I just kind of sold to some friends, and I realized, man, now all of a sudden I've got a real cool gift to give someone that's, having their birthday, or my own friends and family. But I think the reason why I'm saying that is in 2019, I was still in ministry at that stage. I really felt called to structure a company, a P2 Ltd, just going through the motions of opening up a company. And I had a struggle with that because of everything that I've said thus far about really feeling like focusing fully on ministry. And then I would just kind of bed it and have conversation with God again, maybe on an outreach or praying into, and feel reminded again, like go through the motions of structuring a P2 Ltd. And I mean, fast forward now, being in 2024, 5 years later, that same P2 Ltd, which is called Delight in Life, meaning that we can delight in life as in enjoy life. I do believe God has given us life in a sense to enjoy it, but enjoy it understanding that He is life. So life can never be enjoyed outside of the fact that Jesus is life, because you feel empty. Even if you go on 100 trips and do all the stuff that you ever felt you wanted to do. I mean, just go on the YouTube page and see people traveling a lot, call them up, they'll tell you there's still some empty feeling inside. Yes, all of these things are amazing, but there's still kind of that something's not fitting together. And so that was where the company had its name derived from. And that company is to this day the same company that all the properties that Carissa and I had the privilege of being a part of, it's structured in that. I remember even in COVID, I was still in full-time ministry, and I was in lockdown at my dad's house in Ivongo, which is close to Margate in the South Coast area. And I just felt stimulated to really do relief projects. I believe you would remember that. We just started sending out, guys, if you know of anyone that might be able to maybe sponsor some groceries to some misfortunate families that might have lost their jobs or that doesn't have an income anymore. And I remember there were literal thousands and thousands of rand that went through that bank account because the structure was there. All of a sudden, the Light in Life P2 Ltd had a bank account, and money can get paid into that, and grocery vouchers can be bought, and people can be uplifted. And that did something in my heart of realizing what a business structure can do and can mean for people. And that same reality, later on, I had my first opportunity of becoming a real estate owner, and it was due to those projects that the bank looked at the Light in Life P2 Ltd with much more favor. And just the bank says give 6 month bank statements, so I give them 6 months bank statements. But then they look at the bank statements, and there's obviously a reality of finances. But those finances were properly used for relief in the COVID season. Nothing of those finances, there were no profits made, there were nothing held back, but just way leads on to way. I think that's kind of there's a poem of Robert Frost that maybe some of the listeners can go and read it. I think the poem's name is Forest or Two Roads Diverge in a Yellow Wood. That's the opening line of the poem. And there's a way lead unto way moment where it just says kind of the fact that I step foot by foot, step by step, led me to something. And I can't really go back to that, because the fact that I was led to the next step and the next step and the next step, I can't reiterate with the same value of information that I received going step by step. And my journey is a lot like that. Nehemiah says, don't despise the days of small beginning. And for me, that was one brick at a moment. Like build the wall in front of your own house. That was the strategy he gave Israel to rebuild the city's wall. I mean, that's a big project. And he just said, all you have to do is build a piece of wall in front of your house.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting here is God's wisdom in helping you work in the system that the world has, right? So a bank wants to see legitimacy before giving you a loan, because they need some form of proof that you'll be able to pay back whatever the loan might be or whatever the case may be. So just funds moving through a bank account, the fact that you had 6 months accounts was worth a lot, because it enabled you to make an investment. And if you didn't have that, you would be 6 months either waiting to get there, where you'd have to make some form of transactions, or you'd have to go and find private equity loans from parents or friends or family. So I appreciate the fact to understand how these systems work, because they're there for a reason. I mean, the banks only do business with companies that have been existing for more than X number of months, because statistically speaking, they will have less chance of forfeiting or defaulting on their loans. So I understand why the system works that way, but it's really cool to hear how God was providing for you in that sense.
Definitely. And I think back even then, Delight in Life wasn't what they call a property holding company, which means the company is literally just structured to hold property. It was a transactional company, meaning the company had quite a fervor or a focus to transact, to make money, to do business. And the way the banks look at a property holding company and the way they look at transactional companies, it's two different things. And the fact that Delight in Life at that stage was a transactional company, Carissa and I both were directors of the company. Absa Bank gave the company, in its sense of being transactional, a loan to then acquire a property, which we then needed some personal investment equity to get the whole deal through. And that's an amazing story, maybe for another day. But the point that I want to make is, fast forward then again a few years later, now I've got 3 kids. I'm staying in a 2-bedroom apartment. It has become way too small. We really need to trust the Lord to move. And an opportunity opens to buy a house or a home for ourselves. And I remember being very hesitant in going in that deal, because I wasn't sure in what capacity the whole situation, what the banks will look like. Because at that stage, just Delight in Life became a little less transactional, and I was focused more at that stage, already positioned or pivoted into full-time business. So I was at the business side of things, so my own business kind of sat on the back burner, and we applied, and just F&B came back and said they want to give us a full loan to buy the house. And I mean, backtrack now, where I feel the Lord called me to structure the business in 2019, and fast forward to buying my own home where I could just have some more space for all the kids that just became part of my life in a very short season. That it's important. Now I want to stress that your question was, what did I learn in those ministry years, or what things that I go through that I kind of feel made me experience some things that benefit me to this day. I believe one thing is definitely there is to really be obedient in the season that you are called. A part in Hebrews that says, make straight the path, strengthening, make straight the path, unless that which is weak, the ankles, the knees, that which is weak, kind of fall out or makes you stumble. And I think in my ministry years, make straight the path was being full-time ministry. Don't seek a door out of this. Go through the motions of the peculiarity and the emotions you feel, and maybe the stressful seasons where you're not really sure exactly how everything is going to pan out, so there's just so many stories about God's faithfulness and the way He positioned me in certain senses. And I remember, so I pivoted from full-time ministry to business in June 2021. And I remember standing before this giant called business. And now I'm not young anymore. I'm young, but I'm not young anymore. I'm not like a fresh out of university adult that just wants to make a run for it. I've been in this for 5 years, but I've been in full-time ministry for 5 years. I haven't been in business. I don't have 5 years worth of business experience. Um, and feeling that need of really saying, okay, God, you called me for this. You called me into business. I didn't leave ministry because it didn't work or because I wasn't happy or because I didn't feel like being a pastor anymore. I went into business because I felt there was a call in my life to make a difference in the business ministry and the business industry. And the doors that opened up to me was in the real estate industry, in specifically sales. And I realized at that stage, I felt the only way that I can really make a success of a sales agency is to become a good sales agent. And I mean, that comes with so many labels and so many red tape and just okay, so now you were a pastor and now you're going to be a sales agent. And so I realized that there's probably going to be a steep learning curve for me in this whole thing. And I mean, just the stats in every 5 years, 80% of the people that started in year one falls out of the sales industry in terms of real estate sales. The real estate sales industry, the stats are stacked up against you. And I remember standing in front of this giant just thinking, God, you have to be with me. Like, I'm doing this because I really feel your hand on this. I feel you called me for this. And that is what motivates me. And we literally sat in the printer room because there's 3 businesses inside the business I'm working. So it's Potchefstroom as a holding company, but there's a rental department, complex management, and sales functioning in a sense with each other and also in a sense individually in terms of managers and stakeholders and stuff. And so we sat in the printer room. Like, I literally had to kind of make room for someone if somebody printed something to kind of come and get it. So it was very, very humble beginnings in the beginning. But I'm also glad because I remember there was a stage in my life where I was in ministry. My friends, so I said when I was still in ministry, some of my friends were still studying. And then obviously I was in ministry for 5 years. So a lot of them finished up with their studies, started working, had their first promotions, had their second promotion, had maybe their first manager role, or maybe their big project that came through and became a success. And ministry just works different. You're not a pastor and then a super pastor and then you become a manager pastor and then you become, there's not a lot of career building, and it shouldn't. I don't think it should be. It's good the way it is. But then there was this stark contrast between what I saw my friends experience and out of a career perspective, what I was experiencing in ministry. And like I said, I really felt the need to count the cost toward that. So I did. That's what I said. I did count the cost. It wasn't a problem for me. But now all of a sudden I'm in business. And so there are these career paths. But I feel like I'm like back at base 1 in this baseball game where I don't really know how to hold the bat and I'm not really sure what to expect with the pitcher and like, am I going to be able to hit a home run? Should I hit a home run? Is that the way this works? Is it okay just to hit the ball and just figure out this whole thing? And I remember my wife just really feeling a word that she shared with me that I remember so well 3 years back. Just saying that she really believed God has called me to build things up from the ground, and that many of the hobbies that eventually became small businesses or the light in life and the story I just shared, or investing in property, many of those were kind of a ground up story, a building from the ground up story, starting literally at the very beginning, the very first step. And I just remember how that encouraged me of saying, okay, God, you've done it before. You've started ministries. You've started outreaches to certain spaces. You've started certain structures and certain ways through my hands. You've done that. There are fruit in that. Please do it again. We're in business. There are certain things that do work the same, but there are very different things as well.
Yeah.
And that's the story.
Friends, that is the end of this episode. We look forward to sharing the second part of this conversation with you next week. So please stay tuned and check it out as soon as it releases. Feel free to like and subscribe to this podcast, and please leave your reviews so we can understand what it is that you desire to hear on the Robust Ramblings podcast. Thanks a lot.
I just want to say thanks to everyone for listening, and I just want to encourage everyone just to subscribe, go to our social media pages, Instagram, LinkedIn, and if you guys are keen on booking a call with us to do a session with us and just have good chats, book a call on our Linktree link, and see you guys in the next one. Thanks.